My name is Vivian Hart. I'm 62 years old and I live in Naples, Florida. If you don't know the place, it's the kind of coastal town where the sunsets paint the sky in gold, and you can smell the ocean on the breeze before you even hear the waves. It's the kind of place people save their whole lives to retire to. I was lucky. I made it here early, or maybe I just thought I did. Our house sits at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac. White stucco walls with pale blue shutters, terracotta roof tiles that soak up the sun. It's beautiful, still is. A wide wraparound porch with rocking chairs, a lush backyard with lemon trees, and a little fountain Brian installed for our anniversary years ago. I used to sit out there and think I'd found peace. Now I'm not so sure. Brian, my husband, is 67, a former contractor. Strong hands, silver hair, charming smile. The kind of man who gets nods of approval from other women even in his 60s. We've been married almost 40 years. That used to mean something. But things shift. Quietly, slowly, like sand under your feet when the tide comes in. You barely notice you're sinking. 3 months ago, I had major surgery. I'll spare you the medical details, but it was serious, too serious to ignore. Recovery wasn't just uncomfortable, it was humiliating. Losing independence at this age, it gnaws at you. I couldn't even walk to the bathroom some days. I felt fragile in a way that scared me. For the first time in my life, I needed help. It was Brian who brought up the idea of hiring someone. A housekeeper, maybe. Just until I was steady again. I didn't argue. I didn't have the strength. So we started looking. He did most of the talking. I just sat on the couch, my legs propped up, nodding when I had to. That's when Jenna came into our lives. She was 26, young, glowing, full of that easy, eager energy I remember having once. Blonde ponytail, a quiet voice, clean nails, and soft sneakers that made no sound on the tile floor. Her resume was decent. Some work with older folks, some light cleaning, some caretaking, but what stood out was her smile. It was warm, kind, and when she looked at me, it wasn't with pity. It was almost admiration. "You have a beautiful home, Mrs. Hart," she said the first day, glancing around my sunlit kitchen. "I can tell you've taken care of it for a long time." She won me over quickly, not because of what she said, but how she made me feel, useful, still seen. At first, I was grateful, truly. She brought me tea in the mornings, fluffed the pillows just right, made the air smell like lavender and fresh linen. She even baked once, muffins that Brian said reminded him of his mother's. He laughed more those days, he smiled more, and yet, a little voice in my head began whispering, quietly. At first, I brushed it away. I was tired, on painkillers, overthinking. But I started noticing how Jenna lingered when Brian walked into the room, how her laugh got just a touch higher when he complimented her cooking, how his eyes followed her a little too long when she bent down to pick something up. I'd tell myself, "Vivian, stop it. You're being insecure, jealous even." But then, something else. One morning, I came into the kitchen and found them laughing together. Not just a polite chuckle, something intimate. Brian had his hand on the small of her back, just for a second, just long enough. They both looked up when they saw me. Brian smiled. Jenna blinked fast and stepped away. "I was just showing her how to fix the cabinet hinge," Brian said quickly. "Yeah," Jenna added, "he's got a real knack for it." I nodded, said nothing, but something in my chest tightened. That night, I stared at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above me, while Brian snored gently beside me. I felt cold, not physically, but deep, deep inside. That voice was louder now. It didn't sound like paranoia anymore. It sounded like instinct, but maybe I was just recovering too slowly. Maybe I was losing it. Still, I started watching. As the weeks passed, I told myself it was just a phase, just my mind playing tricks on me. After all, it wasn't like Brian and Jenna had done anything outright wrong. Maybe it was my insecurities bubbling to the surface. Maybe my pain had made me more sensitive than I realized. But little things kept adding up, things I couldn't ignore no matter how hard I tried. Brian and I used to go out for dinner every Friday night. It was our thing. Quiet, simple, nothing extravagant. But after Jenna started working for us, those Friday nights began to slip away. At first, it was harmless. Brian was busy with work or had a project to tend to. I understood, but then the excuses started sounding like, well, excuses. "I'll stay home tonight, Viv," he'd say. "Jenna's got some errands to run for you, and I need to help her with the garage door." I let it go, but every week it felt a little heavier. Every week the house felt a little emptier. One evening, I came down from my bedroom early, hoping to join them for dinner. I'd decided that I'd stop being so sensitive, stop doubting them. But when I reached the kitchen, I froze. Brian was sitting at the table, a glass of wine in hand. Jenna was next to him, sitting just a little too close, too comfortable. She was laughing, her hand resting on his arm. The way they looked at each other, there was an intimacy there that shouldn't have been. I should have said something. I should have walked in and asked, "What's going on here?" Instead, I turned around and walked back up the stairs, my heart pounding. I didn't let them see me cry. I didn't let anyone know the ache that was eating me up inside. But I couldn't shake that image. It played over and over in my mind, like a broken record. I tried to focus on other things, small things, making myself dinner, reading my books. But every time I moved around the house, I noticed little things that had gone missing. First, it was a small silver bracelet I kept on the kitchen counter. I always took it off when I did dishes. One morning, it wasn't there. I assumed I'd misplaced it, maybe left it on my nightstand. But then, a few days later, my favorite scarf, gone. Then a bottle of expensive perfume I had, something Brian had bought me on our anniversary a few years ago, vanished. I thought about asking Jenna, but I wasn't ready to face it, to accuse her of anything. She was the kind of person who would make me feel like I was imagining things, but the items kept disappearing. And Brian, he didn't seem to notice, or maybe he didn't care. I started paying closer attention to the way they interacted when I wasn't around. Jenna would spend hours at the house, working quietly, but there was always something in the air when I walked into a room. The way they paused mid-conversation, the way Brian's tone would shift to something more defensive when I walked in. One afternoon, I overheard them talking as I sat in the living room. I had been watching TV with the volume low, pretending not to listen, but their voices carried. "I think we can manage this, Jenna. Just a little longer, and we'll be free. It'll all work out," Brian said, his voice quiet but firm. "I know," Jenna replied. "I just don't want to hurt her. She's been so good to me." I couldn't hear the rest. I was frozen. My heart was thudding so loudly in my chest, I thought they'd hear it. I wasn't sure what to do. I wasn't sure if I wanted to know. But then, the worst part, the part that shook me to my core, happened. Brian came to me that evening, his face pale, a frown across his features. "You've been acting differently lately, Viv. I'm starting to think you don't trust Jenna," he said, his voice cool, almost accusing. My mouth went dry. "I trust her," I said, my voice breaking. "But I don't trust you." He raised an eyebrow, clearly taken aback. "Come on, Viv, this jealousy, it's not healthy. She's just doing her job. I'm not the one making you feel this way. Maybe you need to stop focusing on the negative." I stared at him, stunned. My own husband, The man I'd spent decades with was turning this around on me. I was the problem. I was the one who was imagining things. I didn't know how to fight that. How do you argue when you're made to feel like the villain in your own home? But that night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to sit around and wait for my life to be stolen from me. I wasn't going to be the one who lost everything. And so I began to plan. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Brian and Jenna. Those little moments, those fleeting touches, those whispered conversations that felt like knives in my chest. My mind kept racing, and the walls of our home felt like they were closing in on me. I had always trusted Brian. I had spent nearly 40 years of my life with him, built a life with him, and yet here I was, questioning everything. I wasn't going to let this go on any longer. I couldn't just ask him. I knew that much. He would deny it, of course. He was too good at deflecting. No, I needed proof, concrete proof. The next day, as Brian left for work, I took a deep breath and made a call. A private investigator. It felt strange at first, like I was betraying my own marriage. But I had no choice. Something inside me was screaming to protect myself. The investigator's name was Martin, a grizzled man with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. I told him everything, every detail that I had noticed, every tiny shift in my world. He promised to keep it quiet, to get me answers. But while I waited for his reports, I decided to take matters into my own hands. That afternoon, while Jenna was cleaning the guest bathroom, I went to Brian's office. His desk was cluttered with papers, old magazines, and half-drunk cups of coffee. I didn't know what I was looking for, but my hands trembled as I sorted through the mess. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I thought maybe I'd find something. An email, a text, anything that could show me the truth. I found nothing, not a single thing. But as I stood there, my eyes catching on a small picture frame on the corner of his desk, something inside me clicked. It was a photo of Brian and me from our last vacation. We were smiling, sunburned, happy, a life we had built together. But next to it, there was another frame, a picture I had never seen before. It was of Brian and Jenna, taken at some party or event. It looked like they were close, laughing in a way that made me feel small. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. I wanted to take it, to throw it across the room, to scream. But I couldn't. I left the photo there and walked away. I had to keep my composure, for now, at least. Later that evening after dinner, I set my plan into motion. I'd been thinking about it for days, weighing my options. The house was big, and I had installed a few cameras years ago. Security, you know? I never thought I'd use them for this. But now I couldn't just wait. I needed to see it. I needed to know if they were hiding something. I found the security system's remote in the drawer, my fingers brushing the cold plastic as I set it up in the living room. I made sure the cameras were positioned to capture the hallway and the kitchen. Jenna was cleaning up after dinner. She hummed softly to herself, not noticing me as I stood in the doorway, watching. Brian was on his phone, his back to me as he leaned against the counter. I didn't feel fear in that moment. I felt resolve. I was going to find out what was happening between them, even if it hurt me to see it. The next few hours felt like years. I stayed in my chair watching the monitors as Jenna and Brian moved about the house. At first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But then, around 10 p.m., Brian stood up from the couch. He walked over to Jenna, who was cleaning up the dishes. And then it happened. I froze, watching as they whispered something to each other. Brian's hand reached out, grazing Jenna's cheek. She leaned into him, and then he kissed her. I couldn't breathe. My heart stopped. But it wasn't just a kiss. It was more. Their lips lingered, as if this was something more than a fleeting moment. I watched as they pulled apart, their faces flushed with something I couldn't quite name. And then Brian spoke again, his words clearer now. I've been thinking about it, Jenna, about how much easier it would be. Just you and me. We could leave. We could start over. Jenna nodded, her eyes soft but determined. I know. I've been thinking the same thing. It's just, how do we do it without hurting her? The words stung like acid. It felt like the world was crumbling around me. I wanted to run, to confront them right then and there. But I stayed still. I let them talk. I needed to hear it all. I'm sorry, Brian, but it feels right, doesn't it? Jenna whispered. Brian's voice was low, almost tender. It does, but it's not just about us anymore. It's about getting out without her knowing. She can't find out, not yet. We've got to wait. And then, just like that, they stopped. They laughed nervously, like nothing had happened, as if I hadn't just witnessed everything. I was no longer living in denial. This was real, and I had proof. The next few days were a blur. My mind couldn't stop replaying the video, the kiss, the whispered promises, the betrayal. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it. I could barely eat, barely sleep, barely think about anything other than the two of them, scheming behind my back. But I wasn't going to let it break me. I wasn't going to be a victim in my own home. The cameras had done their job. I had the evidence I needed, and now it was time to confront them. No more hesitation. No more pretending. It was late one evening when I decided the moment had come. Brian was out at a meeting, and Jenna was in the living room, cleaning up after dinner as usual. I didn't tell her I knew. I didn't have to. The air between us was thick with the knowledge that everything had changed. I walked into the living room, where Jenna was wiping down the coffee table. She looked up at me, a smile that was far too practiced, far too fake, playing on her lips. Hey, Vivian, she said cheerfully, though I could see the tension in her eyes. Jenna, I said, my voice steady, though inside I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff. We need to talk. Her expression faltered, just for a second, before she quickly composed herself. What about? I didn't waste time with small talk. I know about you and Brian. Her eyes widened for a moment, then narrowed. She stood up slowly, a calculated look crossing her face. I don't know what you mean, she said, her voice trembling slightly. I didn't respond right away. I walked to the TV stand and picked up the remote. With a single click, I brought up the footage on the screen, the footage that showed everything, the kiss, the words, the lies. Don't lie to me, I said, my voice sharp. I've seen everything. I know exactly what's been happening. Jenna's face turned pale as she watched the video. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. You've been stealing from me, haven't you? I added, my voice cold now, with the full weight of the truth in it. Those little things you've been taking. I found out. And Brian, he's been planning a life without me. Jenna's gaze flickered to the door, but she didn't run. She was trapped. She knew it. You can leave now, Jenna, I said. I've had enough. You can pack your things and go. I didn't even flinch when she turned and walked out the door, her head low, her hands trembling. She knew there was no escaping the truth, but I wasn't finished. When Brian came home later that evening, I didn't even let him speak. He walked through the door, looking tired and distracted, but he froze when he saw me standing in the living room, arms crossed. Vivian, what's going on? He asked, his voice weak with confusion. You're done, Brian, I said. I've seen everything. The way you've been lying to me, the way you've been planning to leave me. I won't be part of it anymore. His face went pale as the realization hit. Viv, please. No, I said firmly. I want a divorce. I've had enough of your lies, of your betrayal. You've lost me, And you've lost her, too. I could see the panic in his eyes. The man I thought I knew was breaking down right in front of me, but I wasn't moved. This wasn't about him anymore. This was about me, about reclaiming my life, about standing up for the woman I had become. You're both gone, I repeated, and I'm not looking back. That night, I called a lawyer. The divorce papers were drawn up swiftly, and within a few weeks, I was free. Brian left the house, Jenna disappeared into the background, and the house, this house, was finally mine again. I spent the following year rebuilding. I took time for myself, something I hadn't done in decades. I worked on my health, my happiness, my strength, and through all of it, my neighbor Tom, who had been nothing more than a friendly face for years, became more. We spent time together, shared meals, talked long into the night. He was kind, attentive, and patient with me. It wasn't a rush. It wasn't about replacing the past. It was about healing. A year after Brian left, I married Tom in a quiet ceremony in my backyard. The Florida air was warm, the sun setting in the distance, and for the first time in a long while, I felt at peace. But that wasn't the end of my story. Number. There was one last thing to do. I sat down one evening, in the same spot where I had once cried myself to sleep, and made a decision. I grabbed my phone, opened the camera, and began to speak. I kicked out my replacement, I said, my voice calm, but with a sense of finality that echoed through the room, and bought myself a new life. I hit post and shared the video on social media. Within hours, it went viral. The world saw my story, the betrayal, the hurt, the redemption. It was my story, told on my terms, and it resonated with so many. Women, men, people who had faced similar pain and loss. The comments flooded in, some supportive, some questioning. But I didn't care. This was my victory, my truth. As I sat back, watching the video spread across the internet, I couldn't help but smile. I had taken control of my own story, and nothing, no one, could take that from me.